Today is a dark day in our state as the Florida House of Representatives are in the precipice of passing not one, but two discriminatory bills that will harm our LGBTQ community and muzzle free speech in our schools and in our businesses. For weeks, we have been speaking out against these bills at every opportunity, and we have seen Floridians from across the entire state travel to Tallahassee to have their voices heard on these dangerous bills before we are all could be silenced by them if they become law. The Don't Say Gay bill is so outrageous and unconscionable that it has received rare criticism and condemnation from the American Bar Association and the White House. This outrage is deserving, and it should be very clear to the Florida Republicans as they are doing something that is very wrong here. Unfortunately, the warnings of the harm done, both risking the mental and physical well-being of LGBTQ students, as well as taking away our constitutional rights of freedom of speech, appear to have fallen on deaf ears. So now, this looks to be another dark day here in the Florida Capitol, as Governor DeSantis and Florida Republicans launch an all-out culture war to play to their base in an election year, rather than focusing on the real issues impacting the people of our state, including affordable housing, clean water, and food security for children and families, just to name a few. And for the Republicans in Tallahassee that keep wanting to say this is a free state. If they were actually the case, why is the House here today debating two extreme bills that are state-sanctioned hatred and censorship, plain and simple? Instead of championing freedom, the Republican legislature seems to be moving the state towards an authoritarian government, intent on criminalizing any activities that simply make them uncomfortable. To hell with the Constitution, individual freedoms, and the safety of Floridians. But it doesn't have to be this way. It is not too late to pump the brakes on these dangerous bills before they become law and do irreparable harm. To all of the members of the Florida House, please hear the countless calls from your constituents and vote no on the Don't Say Gay bill and HB 7 today. I'd like to now turn it over to some true champions for freedom in the Florida House who've been fighting these issues and these hatred measures every step along the way. So first, Representative Michelle Raynor.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, and thank you so much for your leadership, because to be quite honest, we haven't had leadership from the executive level but for Commissioner Fried, especially on these issues. Many of you know me. My name is Representative Michelle Raynor. I am the first openly Black LGBTQ woman to ever hold public office in the state of Florida, and most certainly to ever be elected to this legislature. And when I got elected, I was so excited to come and do the work, right? I was so excited to tackle issues such as affordable housing and clean water and environmental justice. And last year, we were met immediately with a hateful trans bill that meant that our children could not play. And that bill was passed in the nick of time before session ended. And last year, I remember I stood on the floor and I cried because I was so hurt. This year, I'm pissed. I am pissed. Because literally, we do not have to do the things that we are doing. We have two bills, and I stand at the intersection of race, in the intersection of my identity, and the intersection of who I love. And so we understand that these bills are going to harm our children the most. There is a level of privilege that I have as a grown woman that I can navigate this bill and these things, but it's our children that do not have that privilege. And most certainly, it's our most marginalized children, our our trans children, our Black and brown children who do not have the ability to be able to navigate these things in a way that other folks can do this. And so I have a word for Ron DeSantis. I understand that you don't like Black people. I said it. I understand that you don't like gay people. I get it. You don't like trans people. You don't like anyone that is not yourself. That is not a white Republican cis het man. I get it. But what you're not going to be able to do is to continue this kind of horrific carnage in our state and not be met with consequences. And those consequences will be at the voting booth. These consequences will not be on the backs of our children, will not be on the backs of LGBTQ Floridians who have given their lives to serve this state, will not be on the backs of Black and brown children and people and teachers who have given their lives to serve this state. So many of you know I had surgery last week. I'm not even really supposed to be here, but I'm here. I'm here because that's how important these bills are. I am here, and I am not moving. None of us are moving, because if you're going to pass these bills, and we understand they may pass, you're not going to pass them without hearing from us. So I thank the press for being here. What I need the press to do is to amplify these bills. Not only amplify, but amplify the impact, because the bill sponsor doesn't want to talk about the impact. It wants to say that's not in the bill, but let's talk about the impact. They want to be famous, let's make them famous.
Thank you, Representative Raynor, and thank you, Commissioner Fried, for assembling this important moment right now as we go into the Florida House. Today is going to be a really, really important day, because this is a moment where we're going to be fighting some of these extreme proposals with everything that we have. I'm State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith. I represent East Orlando in Orange County in Central Florida. And I want to speak a bit about the danger around the Don't Say Gay legislation that we'll be hearing on the floor today. We know that the reason that this bill has been called the Don't Say Gay bill is because it erases the identities of LGBTQ students, LGBTQ families, and LGBTQ history. It sends a really, really dangerous message that conversations about people like myself, LGBTQ Floridians, folks who are a healthy and normal part of every society and every single school, it sends a dangerous message that conversations about us in the classroom in and of themselves are dangerous. They are not dangerous. But this bill has actually been recently, or is about to be amended, to be substantially worse than it already is. We have seen that the sponsor of the bill in the House has introduced an amendment on the floor for today that we will vote on today that basically requires a school, once they have already assessed and identified that releasing information about a student to a parent would reasonably result in neglect, abandonment, or abuse, the amendment requires the school to disclose the information anyway, and gives the school no more than 6 weeks to disclose this information to a parent, while full knowing that doing so will actually put the child in harm's way. I think that this amendment speaks to the callous disregard for the well-being of children. I had to actually read the amendment several times before I started talking about it publicly, not because I didn't understand it, but because I couldn't comprehend why my Republican colleagues would do something so cruel. Why they would specifically say, in circumstances where the school or a reasonably prudent member of school staff believes that disclosure to a parent will result in neglect, abuse, or abandonment of the child, you must disclose it anyway. And 6 weeks, what is supposed to happen in 6 weeks? So I just want to help folks understand what this means. This is the forced outing of an LGBTQ child to an unsupportive parent who is not ready. 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. 40%, almost half of homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. How did that happen? It happened because too many of our kids who identify as LGBTQ do not have support at home. They do not have accepting or supportive parents. And oftentimes, they are the victims of abuse, abandonment, and neglect already, which pushes them out onto the streets. So this bill, through this amendment, makes the crisis with homeless youth worse for Florida's children. And it also makes another crisis with our kids, which is the epidemic of youth suicide. LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their peers. Why? Are they predisposed to be more likely to attempt suicide? No, they're not predisposed here. But the conditions that they are sometimes subject to when they have unsupportive family members, a home that rejects them, and depending on what school district they're in, possibly a school that doesn't support them either, some students feel that they can't succeed. This is why it is so important not only for us to fight back against this dangerous legislation, but also to make sure that we don't chill, but that we expand safe and healthy schools policies that help LGBTQ youth succeed in our public schools. Because these programs save lives. They save the lives of our young people. They've been proven to work. And yet, the supporters of the Don't Say Gay bill, they bring forward no facts as it relates to why they're doing this. All they bring is rhetoric. And we're literally about to put our kids in harm's way. And that is why myself, Representative Raynor, Representative Arrington, Representative Morales, Commissioner Fried, so many of us are going to be standing up against this bad legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I am Kristen Arrington, State Representative for District 43 in Osceola County. I heard both HB 7 and HB 1557, the Don't Say Gay bill, in my Education and Employment Committee already, and I will be proposing amendments today to both of these bad bills with my colleagues. I want to talk first about HB 7, individual freedom, which is so ironic in the Florida House since we keep hearing about freedom, but as Representative Smith says so many times, that means freedom for some, not freedom for all. And I really want to point out the hypocrisy of our Republican legislature. Last session, we heard legislation regarding free speech that was proposed and passed, which completely contradicts HB 7. We heard legislation requiring all state colleges and universities to conduct annual campus-wide surveys on intellectual freedom and viewpoint diversity. HB 233, which passed, declares that the State Board of Education may not shield students, faculty, or staff at the Florida college system institutions from free speech protected under the First Amendment. Second, last session, we heard legislation regarding the right to free speech for elected officials on social media. The legislator passed this legislation prohibiting a social media platform from willingly deplatforming a candidate. We were told that private businesses had no right to censor elected officials and their messages, and we had the right to hear every view to make our own educated decisions after hearing all sides. How can we be so short-sighted to think that our opinions matter more than our teachers and our students? We are already facing a teacher shortage. If we want to attract more to the teaching profession, we must make sure that their identities, including gender, sexual identity, are also protected from discrimination. We just need to let our teachers do what they do best, teach. If we continue passing legislation that creates more barriers, more discrimination, and possible retaliation for doing their job, we will continue to see teachers leave the state of Florida. Today, I'll be proposing amendments to insert gender, gender identity, and sexual identity to be protected classes of people in this bill. And I will also be proposing an amendment to remove businesses from the bill so they are not penalized for doing their diversity training. The hospitality industry is so important, especially in Central Florida, where I'm from. It plays a huge role in our economy, bringing both billions of dollars in revenue and employing hundreds of thousands of Floridians. With that said, the role of the hospitality industry is to welcome all kinds of people. How can we expect the hospitality industry to successfully do their job without property diversity training? Our businesses are just now starting to recover from the pandemic. Why are we putting strict regulations that may bring costly litigation on them that no one asked for? We should be passing legislation that not only revives businesses, but helps them thrive. And pointless regulations are not a part of that. Next, I want to talk about HB 1557, the Don't Say Gay bill. Yesterday, I received a letter, as did the sponsor and probably all my colleagues, from the Florida Association of School Psychologists. They stand firmly opposed to this bill. I think they probably have a lot more awareness of what our students and our children need than legislators in Tallahassee. They sent a letter, and it says, "We are experiencing an unprecedented mental health crisis among Florida's youth, and this crisis has even more significant consequences for our most vulnerable youth, including those that identify as LGBTQ+. The passage of this bill would create further stigma and shame for LGBTQ youth and families with LGBTQ+ members. Providing confidentiality to students is critical to help youth feel comfortable seeking help. Not only will this bill stigmatize youth who identify as LGBTQ+, but it will also send the message that school staff will be required to out them to their families, whether they are prepared for those conversations and the associated consequences with that. Today, I'll be proposing amendment to insert gender, gender identity, and sexual identity to protected classes of people in this bill. Florida is unfortunately home to Pulse nightclub, which was the shooting that was the worst mass casualty event that targeted LGBTQ+ people in the U.S. It is our job and our responsibility to do everything we can to better protect LGBTQ+ people, and especially our young LGBTQ students. Thank you.
My name is Nathan Brimmer. I use he, him pronouns. I serve the state of Florida as the LGBTQ consumer advocate for the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Affairs. One of the many roles our agency fulfills is to advocate for and on behalf of all consumers. That role was created by Commissioner Nikki Fried based on an intentional diversity and inclusion initiative within our department. As we work to increase access and opportunity and engagement, we do this by increasing outreach efforts to the communities, to the producers we serve, which are many, far more than this native Floridian actually realized. We listen, we learn from the communities we serve. And when we don't, we misunderstand and we underserve. In order to build trust, to serve the public better, we have to listen to the communities we serve. At its best, there is no listening going on when we look at the two bills before us today. At worst, well, you've heard our electeds talk to you about what that might be. My job is to serve all Floridians as a member of the LGBTQ community, to reach all Floridians. Empowering and supporting those diverse communities should be our priority, our collective priority. And legislation like both HB 7 and HB 1557 will certainly have a chilling effect on any open and honest conversation about who we are and where we come from. Government-based censorship, fear of litigation, will not protect consumers and will not protect Floridians. I'm here to promote the very best of my Sunshine State, our history, our diversity. I am a part of that history and that diversity as a member of the LGBTQ community. I'm a very out and proud transgender man. I grew up in these schools. I was a student. I was outed very publicly and forced to drop out of my high school. I had dreams and hopes. 10 years later, I came back to that district and I taught in that district. But I was outed again, and I didn't have employment discrimination protections, and I had to leave that job. And I went back to school. And then I started working as an LGBTQ Youth Center executive director, continuing to serve the youth like me in my home state. And I decided to go to law school because I needed an advocate, so I knew they needed an advocate. I never thought I'd be standing in the cabinet room in my state where just a couple weeks ago I hosted a large number of youth who were coming here to speak to legislators to talk about who they are so that legislators would learn about them. Even the sponsors of these bills, they tried to speak to them, but they didn't want to listen. They didn't want to hear from the folks that they're serving. We have to encourage the very best of who we are, from our students, from our employees, from our employers, from our consumers, and yes, from our leaders. These bills will not do the very best for Florida. We must, as public servants, as electeds, do all we can to ensure that Floridians thrive each and every day. And the toughest part of this, sitting here discussing this as a reasonably prudent person would do about how we do our jobs, it is remarkably personal. Because as you heard from Rep. Smith and Rep. Raynor and Rep. Arrington, the costs are many if we choose to not get this right at this moment. These bills can save lives or cost lives. I hope all the legislators that hear all the debate today and every day forward will at least listen. Talk to the communities you're serving, because if we don't, access and opportunity of many will be overruled and outdone by the discomfort of just a few. And that is not what will bring forward the very best of our Sunshine State. Our state. Thank you.
In 1993, my stepbrother came out to me. He didn't know where to go. He didn't know who to talk to. But he had me. And I was able to help him through the process of finally telling our parents. I vowed that day to always fight, to always to protect him, and to protect the millions of youth across our state and across our country who are having these same conversations with family, with friends. And to think that if I wasn't there, and if he was not allowed to talk to his teachers or to counselors, what could have happened to my stepbrother? So to all of the youth that are listening and that are watching, please know that we have your backs. And we will continue to fight for you, to make sure that your voices are heard, that you are protected, that you understand there is nothing wrong with you. What is wrong is the legislators in this building, not you. And so we will continue to stand strong, continue to build this wall of love across our state to get your backs. We hear you, we see you, and we will fight for you. So I can't thank enough, not just the strong advocates that are behind me, but to the millions of Floridians who have called their legislators, who have marched up to Tallahassee to stand arm in arm with the people that are on the ground fighting this every single day. So the Democratic Caucus, thank you. Thank you for continually standing up and fighting for what is right, and to fight against the state-sanctioned hate and censorship. And now I want to speak again directly to the LGBT community. It is okay to say gay. It's okay to say trans. It's okay to say LGBTQ. And know that we will never stop fighting for you. You are not alone. You are loved. While today may be a dark day here in the state of Florida, I promise you that there will be brighter days ahead. And remember that love always conquers hate. And now we will certainly open it up to the media for questions.
I just have a question, just to clarify, about the amendment with the resulting in abuse, abandonment, or neglect. When I read it, maybe I'm reading it wrong. It says that the subparagraph does not prohibit them from adopting procedures that would withhold information in those cases. Am I reading that wrong?
So, and also, so that amendment actually takes like a lot of reading, because I actually kind of read it the way that you read it. And then when I kept reading it, and then the lawyer in me jumped out and I started parsing the words. Basically, it is, and if I'm not mistaken, it's ambiguous to begin with, but the reading and the intent from what we're hearing from the bill sponsor and the proposer of that amendment is that they have no more than 6 weeks, even if they know the 6 weeks is to develop a plan, which kind of goes back to that portion you just read, to develop a plan on how to tell a parent or a family member, even though they know it may result in abuse, abandonment, or neglect.
This says that it does not prohibit, meaning it would allow them to develop a way to withhold information.
So that's the plan part, but then I think that as we look, and then if you look at it in the entirety of the bill, then there's going to have to be also another cause of action or another trigger to actually say, well, if we know that this will provide abuse, abandonment, or neglect, but that on its face, the amendment will allow them up to 6 weeks if an educator or a principal or someone in their stead knows or has heard or as students come out to them to be able to develop a plan to tell that student's family.
Obviously, this bill has to go through both chambers, and as you've mentioned, the votes right now in the House don't look great, but in the Senate, there are still 2 more committee stops. Are you hopeful that at least with the Don't Say Gay bill, there is going to be some resistance in the upper chamber to this policy?
We're always hopeful. We're always hopeful that the Senate will do right and will not advance this bill. But speaking from somebody who's watched this process for too long, last minute pulling of committee assignments, last minute amendments onto other bills, and when people the last 2 weeks of session go home and can't get to their legislators, as typically when deal cutting happens, when bills move very fast through the process, when bills again are taken out of reference. So we will continue to put the heat onto the Senate to do right and to not advance these pieces of legislation, but the people cannot sit back idly and not continue to focus their attention on the Senate to make sure this bill does not advance. All right, well, thank you for being here.